Hey everybody, meteorologist Aaron Treadway here, and I briefly wanted to talk to you today about the differences in weather and climate. You probably hear both those terms a lot. I mean, we've been talking about weather now for a while, but climate you'll probably hear some from the news and from others. And so we'll talk about what the differences of those two are and a couple other climate variability things going on. So, what is weather? Weather is basically what's happening today and in the short term with the atmosphere. So, it's how the atmosphere is behaving in the short term. Is it sunny? Is it cold? Is it warm? Is it thundering? That's what weather is. It's the minutes to weeks time frame. It's the minutes to weeks changes in the atmosphere. What's going on there? So, the sunny, the storms, the cloudy, humidity, severe weather, how that impacts you on the short term or right now is what weather is. Climate, on the other hand, is over a longer period of time. So there are a lot of things that impact climate, like the water cycle, volcanic eruptions, greenhouse gases, the Earth's rotation, the Earth's tilt, and it's really looking at weather patterns over 30 plus years. So it's, one way to think of it would be what's the weather typically in an area for a long period of time. So the normal weather, normal weather conditions is something that we actually calculate using 30-year time frame periods. Today we're actually expecting below normal highs here in Central Texas. It's going to be in the mid 70s when our normal high for today is normally around 80 already. So we use those climate normals, looking at weather over a longer period of time. And there's a lot that goes into that. There are some climate variability things like El Nino and La Nina, which I'm sure you've heard about. Volcanic eruptions impact that, lots of other things. And there are obviously questions out there about how is the overall global weather changing and how is the overall global climate changing and what roles us as humans and nature and other things have in these changes in both weather and climate. I wanted to briefly dive into El Nino and La Nina because these are probably the two most common things in terms of short-term climate variability that you are going to hear about. They're pretty drastic changes at times over the United States and definitely do impact the weather. And what it is it's conditions over the Pacific Ocean. So normally the trade winds are going from South America towards Australia. What happens during El Nino is these shift directions and actually go towards South America across the equator. And what this does is this actually pushes warm water up against the coast of South America, and that changes the whole temperature profile of the Pacific Ocean. The differences in the warm and the cold layers of the Pacific Ocean change here as well. And what that does is that changes enough of the atmosphere and the circulations in the ocean that it actually impacts weather patterns, impacts the jet stream, which is the typical paths of weather systems. And so for the U.S. and for the world, you can see the two pictures on the right are basically the changes that occur during El Nino winters. So typically for the southern United States, both New Mexico and Texas are included in this. They're typically wetter than normal and cooler than normal when we have an El Nino winter. For parts of the Pacific Northwest, up in Canada and Alaska, it's typically warmer than normal for El Nino winters. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 100 or something in Alaska in winter, or that it's going to be negative 10 in Central Texas in winter. That's not it at all. But then the climate normals, we're looking at, wetter or cooler or warmer than normal. So across the globe there, you can see the different areas across the different continents that are reflected there. But that's it for El Nino. And current climate models are suggesting that an El Nino forms for summer and fall. So we may be looking at these El Nino conditions come winter time this year. So it may actually be a little bit wetter in terms of rainfall, a little bit cooler in terms of temperatures, just by a couple of degrees for the New Mexico and Texas area for the winter of 2017 and 18. La Nina is a little bit of the difference here. Here in La Nina, this is actually a graphic by the UK Met Office, is the winds are going from South America over to Australia. That piles up the warmer water closer to Australia, allows the thermocline of cooler water to get closer to South America, and so that too changes things. Now, for La Nina, it's kind of special because the time of the year actually dictates the different types of changes weather and climate wise across the globe. So for December to February, basically the winter time, La Nina is typically drier and warmer for the southern United States. There's a couple of wet pockets in the Ohio Valley and in the Pacific Northwest, and it's actually cooler for Alaska, Hawaii, and then the northern United States. For June to August, La Nina really doesn't impact the weather that much across the United States, so basically near normal conditions for that, but it does have other impacts across the globe. So again, the important thing for La Nina and El Nino is it just kind of tilts things either in a cooler or wetter or drier or warmer than normal kind of slant during these periods due to the temperatures of the Pacific Ocean and how that impacts the various weather elements and the jet stream going on. The last thing is I really briefly wanted to talk about volcanoes and climate. So we've talked about the water cycle, we've talked about some space weather. Now wanted to talk about some geology briefly, and very much dust and ash can block out sunlight and cause some cooling. So that's one way that volcanoes can impact climate. Sulfuric acid in the atmosphere also reflects incoming solar radiation, which is another way that volcanoes can cause cooling. But on the flip side there, volcanoes release greenhouse gases, which actually could lead to some warming of the atmosphere. So there's a lot of different factors that go into volcanoes and how they impact climate. Here are just a couple in text and picture form, but I did briefly want to impact that in this presentation and just talk about it so that it was here. So that's a bit on climate and a bit on El Nino, La Nina, and volcanoes, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.